Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Friday, October the 20th, 2017. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension of that, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I'm your host, Orit Connor. My two co-hosts, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. You're welcome to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. You can call us on our toll-free number, provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Today being Friday, it is the day that we have reserved for the official opposition in our Legislative Assembly, and it is our pleasure to have in the studio with us this morning the Honorable D. Ezard Miller, who is the leader of the opposition, and of course you know that he represents the district of Northside in our Legislative Assembly as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to first say good morning to my two co-hosts, Ms. Theresa, Dr. Steve Macfield, and then good morning to the Honorable Ezard Miller. Let's start with ladies first. Ms. T, good morning, welcome. How was your evening?
Good morning to you, and protocol already being established, but a special welcome to Ezard, right, to make you feel good. And welcome, because he said that we were setting them up between a rose between two thorns. No, we're not going to stick you up.
Well, I can be the thorn. I can be the thorn between the two roses.
There you go. And also to say a happy Friday to our members of the audience who are listeners locally and abroad, and wishing everyone a very blessed weekend. Happy to have Mr. Ezard this morning.
And good morning, Mr. For the Record, and good morning to the co-host, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, and good morning to the Honorable Ezard Miller, the leader of the opposition, and good morning to all your listeners in For the Record land, locally and abroad. Mr. Miller, I would just like to say to you this morning that after listening to you, I think it was yesterday on the Sterling Drain show, and all of the stuff, I am happy that you are whipping the other part of the parliamentary system, the British parliamentary system of government in the Cayman Islands, and that's the opposition. The opposite people do not understand that the opposition is the other side of the house. It represents the minority of the votes in the Legislative Assembly, and that it is organized just like the government is organized. The only thing that they are not the rulers. They don't have the power to rule the country. As the old saying goes in the British parliamentary system, to the victor goes the spoils. And the opposition might have its say, but the government must have its say, but the government will have its sway. So I am so happy that you're trying to bring to the public what the whole system of the British system of government is, and I really want to congratulate you for that. I know that you were having a hard time convincing people out in the public that is as important as the cabinet, and as important as the other side of the other side of the house, the right side of the house. The other side of the house is just as important. As I was speaking to a young legislator the other morning, the British, if you look at how the house is set out, the physical set out of the house, it is an adversarial system. It is not a system where you have to be meek like going to church. It is an adversarial system where you have to be astute and strong and put your points across and stand for what you believe in. And I believe that you have been doing that, and I really, really want to congratulate you for doing that, Mr. Miller.
Speaking of which, listening to Steve, hold on one second. When has the national security has it been established? That committee has been established, or this is just following on from
I don't know.
Steve's?
But just let me take the opportunity to say good morning to all you here and express my gratitude for being allowed to come on here and discourse with you all and talk to the public. This is the part of politics that I enjoy. The National Security Council, to my knowledge, has not been constituted since election. I wrote the governor, as the public is aware, because I read the letter on Mr. Orr's show in July. I wrote her in June asking for an emergency meeting when we had that spike in crime and burglaries and stuff. And I got a response a couple of weeks later saying that she was going to instruct the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Samuel Rose, to constitute the National Council, and she agreed that we need to have a meeting. Well, here we are 4 months later. To my knowledge, I have not been informed that it's been constituted. I have not been informed that they've had a meeting. If they had a meeting, I have certainly not been elected. But I don't understand what is the delay, because the Constitution clearly says who the members of so it's not a saying that you got to go out in the community and find these people. If I recall correctly, the Premier is on it by virtue of office, the Deputy Premier, the Deputy Governor, the Governor herself, the Leader of the Opposition, the Chief of Police, the Attorney General, and I think it's 2 members from the community. So it's only the 2 persons from the community that they would have in a difficulty, because everybody else is there. But here's the problem we have. I called for the meeting. None of the other members, the Premier, the Deputy Premier, the other politicians, have agreed to have a meeting, have supported in calling a meeting. I don't know why they put these things in the Constitution, and then we are so reluctant to use them to the maximum of what we hope they were intended to be used for. Because the PPM campaigned they were going to reduce gun crime by 50%, I think it was, right? Well, you know what, we know what happened here the last weekend. But there's no urgency to deal with these things, because I would have hoped that the National Security Council was the body that was going to demand from the various civil service bodies certain proposals to get a crime strategy that we could sell to the country, and then require the various bodies like the police, the judicial system, the administration and government to follow that strategy to make a dent in crime. But it's very convenient for politicians in Cayman to say, well, you know, police is the responsibility of the governor, and therefore I can't do anything, and the appointment of this council is not for the governor. But if I was Premier, I know who the people are. If she don't appoint a council, I would appoint it myself and call a meeting. She don't want to come, she don't come.
Okay, I want to take an opportunity, and I think you may want to as well, Mr. Miller. There are families who have lost loved ones over the past week, days as well, and I didn't become aware of this until a few days ago, but Mr. Turner Miles, we also know him as Tiger. He's the father of James Miles Jamo, who is very popular in the Cayman Islands, popular here on Radio Cayman as well. The Youth Flex show is something that he's, intricately involved in as well. So we just want to extend our condolences to all of those families who have lost loved ones, and in particular Jamo and his family as well.
I certainly would join you in that, and also for the Forbes family for the loss of their mother in my constituency.
Yes. Okay, now that you have the mic, Mr. Miller, again, welcome to For the Record. Good to have you back. I must say that Just like Dr. Maxfield has pointed out, you're whipping things into place. You've provided Radio Cayman with a schedule in terms of who from the opposition will be on each Friday. So there is certainty there with that, more than we can say about the government in this case. But I can say that we were planning on having customs on Monday, as well. But tell us what has been happening, where we're moving forward. We want to talk a little bit about the public, about the
Public Accounts Committee.
Public Accounts Committee as well.
Okay, well, we could back up a little bit. We have been on a tour of all of the schools, the government schools. We still have Cayman Bragg to do, but we've done all the primary schools in Cayman and both of the 2 high schools. And it certainly has been worth the time that we have invested in doing it. Many times we sit in Finance Committee and particularly Mr. McLean and I and ask questions, and we're giving answers that we're not too sure is the whole story, to be gentle. And I can tell you that was a huge learning curve for the members of the opposition. In a kind of a nutshell, I would sum it up this way. What did we find that was good? We found that the children were enthusiastic and willing to engage us and willing to learn. The teachers, we found, were working extremely hard under difficult conditions. But most of the teachers, again, had that enthusiasm about about what they were doing and the lives that they were molding and preparing for adulthood. The common bad things that we found was shortage of resources, human resources, numbers of teachers, teachers' aides, teachers' assistants, consumable supplies, constant complaint, right? Teachers are still having to take money out of their pocket to provide supplies for their classes, which is untenable. There's no reason for that kind of thing. Huge concerns in most instances from the teachers about the conditions of the physical structures that they're working from, and oftentimes just a simple need for more space to be able to do more direct teaching, particularly for the special education needs and the high flyers. What we found was that in most classes, you had a teacher dealing with a huge range of abilities and capacities in children. You had the SENs at the lower end, you had the middle performers, you had the regular performers, you had the high flyers. And when you're in a class of 25 children and you have that range and you don't have any assistance to help you, it makes it very difficult because everybody's losing. And what seems to be happening is that we seem to be providing just enough human resources and just enough supplies to get us in trouble down the road. I'll give an example. One school, for instance, has 4 classes for each school year. So you have a total of 24 classes in that school. We have 24 teachers, but you only have 1 support assistant teacher for each year. So at any time, any one of that in that year, any one of those people are sick or can't come to work, the whole thing is out of whack. And we just need to make the commitment. We need to invest properly in education. We can't afford to deny our children educational opportunities while we're building a cruise ship dock. This country needs, in this financial budget that we're going to approve, which is going to be 2 one-year budgets, 2018 and 2019. We need to have between $75 and $100 million in the budget for education.
Okay, we have to take a commercial break now, folks. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I want to remind you that we have in the studio with us this morning Honorable D. Ezard Miller, Leader of the Opposition, along with my two co-hosts, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. We will now continue our conversation with Mr. Miller.
Yeah, you know, and we got to stop. We have to stop making excuse and trying to make the public believe that we're serious about making education our number one priority, because we are not doing that. Right? Of course, when we started this debate on the strategic policy statement, and we said we want education to be number one, the Premier got up and gave me a lecture on economics that I don't understand how countries work, and you got to invest in the economy to have money to do education. Well, we tabled a motion that we believe can help us fund. Certainly will generate enough money to provide for scholarships and for consumables, even if it can't deal with the capital. And this motion is moved by Mr. Christopher Saunders, who you know is our minister, shadow minister for finance, and Mr. Anthony Eden. And here's what it says: Education Fund. Whereas there is much public support for investment in education, and whereas there is concern among many Caymanians that the foreign exchange rate between the Cayman Islands dollar and the United States dollar is too high for a risk-free currency, and whereas there are many companies with approved business staffing plans that require scholarships to be granted to Caymanians annually, and whereas this Legislative Assembly has created funds over the years to protect our environment and other natural resources, be it therefore resolved that the government considers establishing an education fund to assist with the development and advancement of education in the Cayman Islands, and be it further resolved that the government considers funding the education fund with 50% of the foreign exchange spread earned by banks transacting between the Cayman Islands dollar and the United States dollar, and be it further resolved that the government considers funding this education fund by giving companies the option of paying into the education fund an equivalent amount as per their approved business staffing plan. Because we know that in the business staffing plan, every business staffing plan carries with it certain obligations to provide a certain numbers of scholarships,
Right.
which there's no evidence and there's no follow-up. We believe that those two things can generate $30+ million.
And from the banking side of things, there would be no adverse effect to the banking public in terms of the rate. It wouldn't cost
right now
the customers
right now, if you go to in a bank in town and you hand them a $1 US cash, they're gonna give you 80 cents same amount.
Yes.
If you turn around and say I want to buy that dollar back, they can charge you 8 or 4 cents. That 4 cents, we're saying, listen, the banks can keep 2%, two of the cents, and give the education fund 2 cents. There should be under the business staffing.
And that rate, that 84-cent exchange rate, is set by whom?
By the banks.
But then they could possibly increase it to say 86, which would then cost the customer more.
But I
to
think
purchase it.
I think
that's when I asked about the repercussions. That's what I was.
But I don't think they can justify that.
Okay.
I don't think they can justify.
And there's
that.
SEMA that could step
and
in.
one of the things that we have another motion which Mr. Saunders carried in the August, which requires the government to give SEMA the authority and the legislative teeth to regulate local banking operations, because right now they really don't have to get SEMA approval and stuff like that, right? And if the banks try that, the government can stop it by regulation under the existing banking law. But it should not have any adverse effect on the cost of living or anything else, because it's already being charged by the banks. It's just that they're putting it straight to their bottom line. And what we're saying is, you've made enough money since the currency came in out of it. We need to educate Caymanians. We want 2 cents out of it to be put into this fund. And there has to be hundreds of scholarships that should be offered through these business staffing plans that we have no knowledge or no record that they're being offered. So what we're suggesting is you say to the big law firm that has a business staffing plan and supposed to be giving out maybe 10 scholarships per year, because there's usually a ratio between the number of work permits they have, right? If we set that amount at what government is offering of $20,000, that one law firm who has to give out 10 scholarships will pay $200,000 into the fund, right? And then that is used for funding education.
Okay. If I may switch gears, well, not really switching gears because it's really on the same topic about the banking sector. And one of our listeners on Wednesday sent an email and said, your discussion last week, as I recall, on the current banking system in Cayman has prompted me to share a concern that I have. In a nutshell, it seems that banks have free rein to do whatever they wish under the guise of compliance, or worse yet, they are empowered by the regulatory body to have wide discretionary powers which do not serve the interest of the public. And then they pointed out that they were including a PDF copy of one piece of compliance that was sent to them. A person says, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that they wish to be indemnified against their own incompetence. I would like to hear what Dr. Steve and Ms. Teresa think about it. It says, below is an excerpt from the accompanying email from the bank, and of course he did not wish to name the institution concerned. But one part of it is, quote, letters in bold are in my doing. As per our conversation during the review of your customer file, our reviewing team identified that the following documents are still required to keep your account up to date and in compliance with the recently mandated Cayman Islands Monetary Authority requirements. And then there was another one to complete and execute a foreign currency deposit account assessment. See attached. And of course, they did send a PDF of the compliance form, a banking compliance form. What they're in essence saying, yes, and sorry, this banking compliance forms, it is in the title of it is in indemnity in respect of telephone, telex, facsimile, or electronic mail instructions, and it's from a particular institution. What they're saying is that the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority has certain requirements, but they have allowed the financial institutions to go beyond those requirements and add their own requirements as well. When I say their own, that is the banking institutions, their own requirements as well. And they were quite concerned about that. Not so much about what the monetary authority requires, but what the banks themselves require. Anyone has any comments on, or what we can do? I'll let you see the document, and then after we come from the 8 o'clock news, then we can talk about it as well. We have about 1 minute before we break for the 8 o'clock news.
But I was just going to say, though, there's one thing to carry on the business of banking, and with that comes certain costs. But those costs are to be absorbed by the banks. That's the cost of their operational function in a particular environment. But what I have observed that has been happening is that they transfer those costs to the consumers, and the consumers don't have any rights, certainly any rights under the sale of the legislation that currently exists for them to have any say in how these things are managed. I think one of the questions that was raised the last time when Emily Arden-McLean was here was whether or not SEMA was involved, because he gave a specific example of his own personal experience of what transpired. But, that is something that ought to be, looked after seriously.
But the customers, we are forgetting that we have authority. We're their customers. We must treat us properly. I ain't paying no bank no $5 or no $10 to charge a check for me. Because on the account, I am not paying it. Their client, they give them a checkbook. The client have an account with them. The government, the client pays stamp duty to make it legal tender. Next thing, you're going to be, well, they're charging you for cash now too. If a customer of a bank writes me as a Miller check for $2,000 and I take it to his bank, and because I don't have an account there, I am not allowing him to steal $5 from me.
But
The instrument says $2,000. I'm not leaving the counter until I get my $2,000, and I'm not paying no $5. Call your client up and tell him to authorize you deducting the $5 from his account, because I'm not accepting it. That's the attitude Caymanians must take.
But you see that we are not in a position of strength in that way, because most of us don't even know what our rights are. And I mean, we keep talking about this whole thing about courage, that Caymanians don't even have the courage to stand up and actually demand what they're entitled to. Yeah,
that's the problem. That's because it's like what Gerard said when he was using the maritime metaphor, that we all want to be the top dog, the captain. And if we can't steer the ship from this wheelhouse, we go and wreck the engine. If you expand that to all facts of Caymanian life, a Caymanian doesn't want to protect the next one. And when you stand up in the bank, they're going to say that you were a fool and that you were loudmouth and that you're making trouble. That's what you are going to get.
Okay. It happened to me, and I went so loud, and I said, "Listen, I'm sorry, people, but I'm not leaving until I get my money." And they brought out the manager. What he doing? I said, "Your clerk is stealing $5 from me." Say, well, how do you mean stealing? I said, well, that piece of paper from your office, from your client, says $2,000. She offered me $19.95. That's stealing $5. I want my $5.
Okay, we're going to take our break for the 8 o'clock.
Okay, calm down. We'll waive it for you. That's all you got to do. You got to stand up to him.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be selective.
That's right.
It has to be across the board for everyone. Let's take our 8 o'clock news break now, folks. For the record, we'll be back immediately after the 8 o'clock news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, my two co-hosts, Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. And of course, it is our pleasure to have in the studio with us the Honorable D. Ezard Miller, Leader of the Opposition, as well. I want to talk a little bit more, if we may, Mr. Miller, about the banking system and some of the requirements and some of people's complaints. Another...
You know, I would prefer to talk about education.
I know, yeah. We'll get to that, too. We'll get to that, too. Says another listener says, this is very important discussion about the banks and how far they're allowed to go. Some time ago, a particular bank sent us a form requiring information which they clearly had on file and asking us to state that we were not U.S. citizens. Supposedly, this information would be entered by a data input clerk. We wrote back to the manager stating that we would not be sending such information to them, and if they wanted it, they could search their files and contact the immigration department. So it's not only the charges, as bad as they are, but also this type of high-handedness that they seem to think they are allowed to do. The thing is that it seems as if the customers, the general public, are being punished for the sins of the banks, because those that have made settlements with the Security and Exchange Commission, with the U.S. government, those who have paid their fines and paid restitutions and stuff, it wasn't their Caymanian customers that created it, that caused this. It was themselves. We see a story just emerged yesterday in the UK, HSBC and I think another bank called Standard something, where it has been revealed that they were involved in money laundering. So there's going to be a huge inquiry, about that at this point in time. The general public are now paying for the sins of the banks.
Well, I've always felt that when we started KYC, at the behest and request of external forces, the government of the day should have carved out some exceptions for the local people. But we didn't, just like the U.S. never bought a carves out for their people. I mean, it is so much more difficult for me as a Caymanian to open an account in my own country than it is for me as a non-U.S. citizen to open a bank account in the United States. It's unbelievable. You can complete the whole transaction in about half an hour.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
One of the things that I have been trying to advocate, and I have given this information to a lot of the people, not you, Mr. Miller, to a lot of the other people who were styling themselves as being the advocates on the platform and in relation to finance. In England, they have something called the Consumer Credit Act,
Right.
1974, that regulates the relationship between the lender and the lendee, and so forth. We don't have anything like that here. You borrow at the mercy of the lender, and the lender has all the power. And not only that, I was so surprised to see that in the Land Registration Act law, 2004, that the lender, the banks have even gotten the Legislative Assembly to put into the law that when you pay your mortgage to them, that the interest comes out first.
Oh, yeah.
The interest comes out first. Now, what does the government has to do with that? That should be a relationship between you and the bank, and it should not have. Government should not be regulating whether the bank should take out your principal first or your interest first. That should not be in the land registry law.
But you see, we have allowed successive governments have allowed the whole financial industry and now the tourism industry to intimidate us into no action. With this fear, that they create this fear that if we say anything, the whole business is going to evaporate and move overnight. Let's understand one thing. Any of these people in the financial industry, if they could make more money than they're making in Cayman somewhere else, they wouldn't be here. End of story. So we need to put some controls on them, and we need to carve out certain benefits for our Caymanian people. We need proper mortgage legislation. We need to bring the pension funds back into the local market so we have long-term money that young Caymanians can use to invest in owning a home and in developing the future for themselves.
And Mr. Miller, going back to education, which is you're the shadow minister of in the opposition. I believe that this is my opinion. I believe that we should cancel the idea of a pension for expatriate workers to pay when they come into the island. And I think we should go directly to a payroll tax instead of the pension. Going directly to a payroll tax, whether 10% or 8% or 12%, and we should use that. That should go directly to education, to an education fund.
Okay. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Oscar.
Good morning, ma'am.
And good morning to your panel.
Good morning.
Yes. I heard Ezra in regards to your check when you go to the bank, and he's not going to leave until he get the amount that his check is $42,000. I just want to say that even your pension check that you get from the pensioners' locations, they take out their money before they give you a check. So when you go to the bank, your check and your paperwork they give you, you're already short of $10. So how can I demand them to give me back my $10 when they already took it out when they brought up my check?
Who took it out?
The Chamber of Commerce, the pension people took it out automatically and gave me a $10 that's on my private pension.
But on what basis are they deducting your pension allocation for $10?
$10 service charge. You just say $10 service charge. I had to check cash at the bank that it was drawn under. They took it out automatically, they claim.
Are you saying that the bank deducted that $10
No pension.
I don't know who deducted it, but when I got
Okay.
my pension check, it was already taken out. I did not get what I was supposed to get.
And you have a
$10.
private. You have a private. Is this a private pension firm?
Jesus.
That was my
Fund?
You said it's Chamber of Commerce pension plan, right?
I have not submitted anything in the last 10 years since I've been working with government. I've just been sitting there for the last 10 years. So I'm eligible to pull from it now. And they took out $10 when I went to pick up the checks from them, and when I went to the bank, they gave me what the check said on it. So I said, why is it $10 short? Or because, bank charges and whatever.
Yeah, but that's the bank taking out, and you should demand your $10.
It was already taken out, sweetheart. It was already taken out when I took the check to the bank.
So your check was written $10 short.
That's right.
Yes.
But do you know whether?
Thing,
But does she know whether or not there's an agreement between her and the pension provider to deduct that $10?
Otherwise,
don't
you
know
can't
how-
do it.
I don't
Otherwise, you
know.
can't do it.
I don't know. They
Okay.
never tell me they'll be deducting $10 from my.
But you should
my
demand
check.
you
It's
should
when
demand
I
an
got
explanation
there.
and a justification for it.
Yeah, when I got there and saw it, I said, well, what happened here? Well, $10 for the check and the whatever. So they took out $10. So they're gonna be taking out $10 again next month. You understand? And
But you
even
need to
if
find
I
out
was
what
checked-
you need to get a justification for it.
Because it
Well,
could
I
be
will
a
when I go
servicing
next
fee.
month, believe me, I will. And when I got a pension check from government at one point in time, and then I got a half a paycheck from government at one point in time, and went to Royal Bank to cash them, and they charged me to even cash a government check. Unbelievable. But what I want to say is that what's messing up a lot of us here with our loans at the bank too. They are say for example, right? I owe the bank $1,000 a month on my mortgage. When that $1,000 goes in, they knocks off $5 automatically from the computer. They tell me, and then that makes your loan $5 short. And then they call you or put a paper in the mail telling you that you late fee $32 charge on my $1,000 that I just put in there, thinking on my loan is good to go. Only the last 5 years, I find out that this has been happening to me on a 20-year loan that I got there at the bank. You understand where I'm coming from?
Wow.
So we are not getting educated. So that's why a lot of us is falling on the wayside when it comes to our loans, because we put in the amount that the loan is for, and the majority of people at the bank don't tell you, hey, you got to put an extra $5 or an extra $10 because then the machine going to pull the service charge automatically, and it makes your loan short, and then you call you and tell you got to bring them $32. Can you imagine? I went through that for almost the 20 years of my house mortgage that I've been fighting with for
Over a
years.
20-year period, that's quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
You know what? And listen to me now. When you out of that $5 for the next 25 years, which you're hoping to have 4 more years on the loan, you add that up and you want to talk about money that they're going to make off of me alone, just the $5 that they're collecting, and then knocking me off to tell me I owe them $32, and I got to go take them at $32. But I just want to say that, Mr. Miller, is there any way in the house, y'all is always working on budget. Can't you all wear your all individual mics on you all? Because when you all move up and down from the bike, we're losing part of the conversation. The TV man, you don't even know who is talking. You got to strain your eyes to see whose mouth is moving, or unless you recognize the person's voice. Then you look at that person and continue to listen. I mean, this house been in there now for donkey years, and they
And
can't
that's the
get
problem.
each
The
one of
sound
you.
system has also been there for donkey years.
And they will not give you all the individual mic. So
We-
when you all move from the mic, we can still hear what y'all saying. Y'all don't value, they don't
We
value all that much.
we just need a proper sound system. That's all. The sound
Well,
system
when you all move away from the mic, we can't hear. And when the cameraman just focus there on the whole area, or come back to you, or go to the Mr. Whoever the speaker of the house, you it's crazy. But I just wanted to say one more thing. I'm gonna go, Mr. OC.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Miller, you know what I can't understand? We got that huge school up there in the north side now. They just finished the building downtown, John Gray, that big old auditorium. Every time that government has to house something, they go on the 7 Mile and support those hotels. Why can't you all build your own building? So when you're going to have some function,
We don't need
y'all
to build
can go
anything.
and have it.
They don't need to build anything to how their functions are. They got Pedro Castle, which is a proper
Well,
facility to
exactly.
have those stuff.
Exactly. And if you want to bring in caterers, some local caterers and some hotel caterers, it's fine. But spread the goodness to our people here in the island as well, too. We are here suffering. And I just feel like government needs to step up to the plate a little bit more and take care of their people. And I got to tell you right now, Mr. Miller, no disrespect to you or anybody else. You're trying to do your best, but you always getting somebody to shoot you down, just like all the other ones. And I just want to say, we blame Makiwa for this and we blame Makiwa for that. and McKeever's in the chair now, and people think they're still happening. Who we supposed to blame now since we can't blame Paul McKeever no more? He got living hell. McKeever gave away this, McKeever gave away that. Now who's giving away now? I want to know who's giving away now. That's why I like someone to call it radio and tell me who's giving away now.
Well, I'll tell you right now.
McKeever gave everything.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you.
The only people in this country who have the authority to distribute government resources is the cabinet and the government who voted and the people who voted them into cabinet.
Okay, Paul, I want to take a break. I need to take a break now, folks. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField, and the Honorable D. Ezard Miller, Leader of the Opposition. Folks, the number of complaints that we hear on talk shows, we hear people call in on this talk show, they do it on other talk shows as well. The little man on the street, or man or woman on the street, who just trying to eke out a living day to day, feel that the system, the deck is stacked against them, that the system is working against them. They shouldn't really have to be calling in on talk shows to air their grievances and to be pleading. We need to establish some sort of consumer protection agency in the Cayman Islands, someplace where people can go and be heard and have some confidence that their issues will be addressed. You heard me a few days ago talk about what the Bahamian government was going to do in relation to the banking fees, that they were going to sit down and speak with the banking industry about it and try to get some understanding of what has happened. And we hear people complain about it here every day, but no one does anything about it. Is it because there are no consequences involved as a result of doing nothing, because you wait 4 years down the line before consequences can be thought about, and in that case by then people have forgotten about it, or you flash something else in their face and say, here's what we're going to give you this time around.
But in 2015, just to stick up in, Mr. Miller, I know that the Law Reform Commission investigated this, and we were talking about during the break about the sale of goods law, and that was revised, but that really relates to certain contractual relations, but that really doesn't really take us where we need to go. And I know that recommendations were made subsequently last year to develop a Consumer Affairs Commission, at least as a beginning, to start to deal with some of the issues. I was speaking to our colleagues during the break as well about the new utility regulation and competition law, and I was pretty impressed with some of the provisions that has there with respect to gas, fuel, ICTA, ICT, and water and waste. Yeah, that's right. And if that law is properly enforced, and I have to say properly enforced, because historically we tend to have legislation, and of course the immigration law always comes to mind, that is rarely enforced where it needs to be. Something similar is required with respect to the wider issues that, as you and you speak of the average person on the street. So I just wanted to stick that in there so that folks know that there is a need for this kind of protection, because steps have been taken with other areas, but now we need to have other areas actually reviewed as well.
That whole utility regulation is an informative piece of legislation. Yeah. But it really doesn't do what needs to be done. For instance, there is almost no capability in those for the fuel regulators to set or control the price of fuel that we consume. We know that we used Mr. McLean introduced it with the new CUC license Markham, right? We tried to get the government to put into those same regulations and that utilities law, that off-reg law, that we could apply that same system to cost of fuel. And what we, one of the things that the average person and all of us need to understand, that there are entities in this country that spend lots of money to keep government from enforcing legislation. First of all, they lobby against the legislation being passed. When the legislation is passed, then they lobby people not to enforce, right? And we have lots of good laws on the books that are simply not being enforced. And we fall back on the old adage that, with the civil servants is getting too big, right? So we can't hire 15 enforcement officers for immigration. They're not concerned about the 15 officers' growth in immigration. They're concerned about what enforcement of the immigration law is going to do to their profit, and they agreed. So they redirect their opposition to the legislation once the politicians become brave enough to pass adequate legislation. Then they use other tactics then to keep the legislation from being enforced.
But I beg to differ with you about the pricing with that, because the law is very clear. It's cognizant of market forces and people making investment in certain areas of those areas of the market. But it actually gives the office an opportunity to do what is in the best interest of the consumer, including price.
But there is no, it says that, but there's no formula that they can use to say this is how we're going to enforce this.
But they have the discretion to do that. They have the discretion to do that.
But you see, this is what I'm talking about. Why didn't the forces allow us to put in the law what the formula was going to be? Why is it left to discretion? And then it never happens.
Because things change.
That formula, the way the formula is applied, no matter what changes in the marketplace, it fits into the formula. We use it to set the price of water. We use it to set the price of electricity. I think the private water company has now adopted it to set the price of their water in 7 Mile Beach. Why can't we use it for diesel and gas? Because it forced the regulatory authority to apply what exists. One thing with this discretion, then we have to fight the battle then with the forces to say, because remember, there's only 2 things in Cayman that we pay duty on volume and not cost insurance and freight: liquor and gas and fuel.
That's correct.
Right? And the government does not see the cost of fuel, the originating cost of fuel. If we had that formula specified in the law, they would have to prove to government the various areas of the formula, and the calculation would come out. You were talking about the behemoths. I think they have the formula, and they allow, I think it's a 20% profit margin or something like that. But that's what that formula is designed to do, so that the formula self-adjusts for anything that changes in the marketplace. And the reason we don't have the formula in there, I would argue, is because of the successful lobby of the fuel companies.
Okay, want to switch gears and get back to education, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, people are asking us, well, you're the opposition, what can you do? Well, the rules of parliament prohibit us in the opposition from actually increasing the education vote based on the documents that the government bring down here. So we can't move a motion to increase funding in education. But here's what we can do. We can do things like move this motion, which will provide specific money for education. We can reduce line items. We can move that the money for the dock be reduced, right? So that there's money then available to put in education. And we can say to the Minister of Education, well, we're reducing this so you can get this money to put in education. And there'll have to be a vote on it. Most of them are probably going to lose because they're not going to want to reduce it. But the country must understand that they have the opportunity to do so. And if they're serious about education, they will reduce those votes and increase education vote. And at least we're going to force a debate on all these things so that we establish the priority.
Okay.
Dr. Macfield spoke to a payroll tax, and while he was speaking about that, I guess the thought that crossed my mind was also the cost of work permits. I mean, maybe we should...
But one of the things that we are going to be advocating for in the Legislative Assembly is, we came up with this idea that expatriate children couldn't go to public schools because of the cost to government, right? But what we need to do is we need to allow them to come to school, to the public school, so that we get some integration. But we charge them the same fee that they pay to the private schools. Mm-hmm. But we don't make it a part they got pay to the school because, they wouldn't pay the fee. Tack it onto the work permit. If we're going to charge them $1,000, which is kind of what the private school charge a term, or maybe more, then your work permit is $2,000. You bring in one child. Well, we're going to increase the cost of that $1,000, $3,000 a year, mm-hmm. and your child then goes to go to public school.
There might be a technical difficulty with that because the employer is the one who's responsible for paying the work permit. So you would be passing that on to the employer.
But that's for the employer. Once we make the regulation, that's for the employer and employee to work out.
Yes.
That's their problem, not mine.
That's why I say there would be some technical issue
because they got to work it out for the private schools.
Yeah.
Because they're paying most of them certainly at the higher echelons in the industries out there.
Pay for
the
their employees.
Employer is paying for the school children fee. Trust me.
We're going to take
whether it's here or abroad.
We're going to take a commercial break. For the record, we'll be back shortly.
Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. We have a few callers, one caller, possibly two on hold. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Mr. Osteen.
Morning, sir.
Good morning to Dr. Steve.
Good morning.
Ms. Teresa.
Good morning.
Kieran, and also to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Ezra Miller. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for what you said about the government utilizing people fast. I won't say any more on that. I just thank you for saying that. I'm often wondered why they do it. But I'm with just a lot of half-idiots on one person. This is the second time this week that the sweet music of direct income tax I have heard on the radio someone having the courage to say so, which is inevitable as far as I'm concerned. Miss Dr. Steve, I agree with you 100%. I've been saying it for years. That pension should not be in private hands. They're making a lot of money off of it, sending it away, and it's not a pension, it's a forced saving because people can collect it long before pension ever paid. That's if they leave here or so forth. It should be brought back home. It's a lot of money over there, a lot of money. And of course, you pay it in CI dollars, you're going to get it back in US dollars. We know how money is only worth $1.25 or US here. 80 US cents is $1 here. But it's not worth that in the United States at all. You try and go to a Cambia or bank in the US there and see how much you get for Cayman dollar. The same applies to the health insurance. It should not be controlled by private hands. Remember, mandatory means they have the control. And our elected representatives give that privilege to them. So they can refuse to pay anything they want, they can cherry pick, and we have little people paying into their health insurance, and it is virtually worthless. But when they use it up in 3 months, if they have to go for anything to the hospital or to any other healthcare provider, then it's finished. And they have to continue paying it because the law says it's mandatory. And better yet, you're all lawyers here. You know a lot more than I do. It does not stipulate whether you're employed or not. You should have insurance. I don't think it stipulates that you're employed. I know unemployed people who have to find some way to pay. I know that. And many people cannot pay. Little people out there cutting bush for people or painting a house or something. And when they go to the hospital, they have to find cash to pay it, or they have to owe them, because you can't owe the private doctors on private. So we get into a continuing spiral of debt at the hospital, and little people will continue on. Instead of us just having a plain and simple method of a payroll payroll tax, as you just suggested, Dr. Steve. I don't know why we won't do it. I don't know if it takes more courage or whatever it takes. But that should be done, and I will stand by that forever. A payroll tax. If you want to do it on everybody, or you just want to do it on the foreign or expat workforce here, and start it at 30,000, as that horrible person suggested, Mr. Honorable W. McKeever Bush some years ago. I agreed with it 100%. But I don't know. But I don't see us continuing on this path. The thing I'm thinking about with the education, I'll say this and shut up and hang up from this on. My main concern with us focusing so much on education and not focusing on getting our people to work is that 75% or more of those expat jobs that are here, the 24,000 or 25,000 work permits, they're not any college-educated person. Some of them do have a tertiary education in the service fields and all that, but they're at the high end of things, and many of them the construction. But there are many jobs that do not require anything but a high school education or even less. When I speak to people by the hundreds and of course of a month of work in that field, especially tourism field and so forth. If we educate our people like Barbados did for years and years and years, they were the best educated country in the world. They had the highest literacy rate by far. Will that make us 100% employable? I'm talking about those who want employment. There'll always be a few very low percentage of people who will never want to work in any country. I've lived and worked in 3 countries besides my home here. But will it do that? Or should we focus right now on getting those 2,000 or whatever it is, Caymanians, back to work? Should we focus on that? Get them jobs.
Thank you very much, caller.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Let's take the other caller before no calls. Okay. Opportunity should we take a break now, Paul? And then we can continue to talk until 9 o'clock. Yeah.
But the reason that I don't, in the current situation, support a payroll tax being introduced is because it's only going to be Caymanians pay it. Because all of these other people who are making the big money going to change their methods of payment so that it's not salaried, unless you say you're going to include bonuses and other stuff into and most payroll taxes don't include those kinds of things. It's just straight payroll. I believe that we can get the funds for the things that we need in the ways we were doing it, continue the way we were, with some direct fee structures and to fund education. But just to answer the caller about our focus on education, our focus on education right now is so that we make provision in the next 2 years. At the same time, we're also demanding, and remember we came out from June and talked about the exodus of workers because of the advent of the coming into effect of the pension law, and that the government should have been preparing Caymanians to take those jobs. We were laughed at by the government. They said there was going to be no such exodus, and they had no such evidence of it. Now you hear employers coming out lamenting the fact that they're losing people, and they themselves know that they can simply go to the immigration board and get permits to replace these people. And the problem we have is that they require all of this qualifications for Caymanians applying for the job, right? But they don't require it for work permit people. And many of these work permits that are being granted to these people, I contend, are being granted illegally. Because if you grant a work permit for a bartender who does not have a qualification and experience as a bartender, that's an illegal work permit, because the granting of that permit by the immigration board demands that the person is qualified to do the job. And we hear time and time again, you had a big blow up a couple of weeks ago with the woman who came here, had no qualifications, got a job, made all the money. I had a friend who went to the New Year's Hotel, ordered a red stripe beer. Man said to me, don't know what a red stripe beer is. In the Caribbean, in Cayman. He ordered, we say, okay, I'll have a Corona. He brought him a Heineken. So he asked him, well, where'd you get all your training as a bartender and how much experience you have? And I never worked as a bartender in my life, which is obvious, but he got a work permit. But we don't have any checks and balances. You see, there need to be a way to audit this. But when somebody gets smart enough to FY information, then what do they do? The companies come out and get court injunctions that you can't spray the information. The reason they don't want information sprayed is because they have people in their own organization doing the exact same job and depend on their nationality to what they're being paid. And there's substantial difference, because I have seen it.
Okay, we're going to go to our 9 o'clock headline news. Folks, please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back immediately after our headline news, which is just a few minutes long. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with us this morning, Honorable D. Ezard Miller, Leader of the Opposition, along with my two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. Question for our panel.
I just want to answer one more thing that Mr. Harrison raised.
Okay,
why we're not concentrating enough on jobs. Well, we have filed, Mr. Chris Saunders and Mr. Anthony have filed a motion talking about government security. We expect that this should create between 250 to 300 jobs for Caymanians. It says, whereas security requirements have changed in many countries around the world after 9/11, and whereas the governments in many countries require nationals of their own countries to secure various ports of interest, and whereas the qualifications in many of these countries require extensive background checks, and whereas the best people with the best interest in protecting our people are Caymanians, be it therefore resolved that government considers employing only Caymanians to provide static security services at all government, statutory, and public buildings before December the 31st, 2018. We suspect that should create somewhere around job opportunities of around 250 to 300 Caymanians.
Okay. People have made statements in relation to how dependent government is on work permit fees. Current government, past governments, and looking at future governments as well. When you look at the evolution of the Caymanian protection law and then the immigration law and the stated purposes of those pieces of legislation had very little, or I would say nothing, to do with revenues, with seeking revenues for the country. Now, it eventually became that way because there were some governments who thought by increasing the fees on work permit, that would be an incentive or a disincentive for hiring foreigners, and people would seek to hire Caymanians. We know, for instance, that one particular very popular law firm in the Cayman Islands, and I heard this when I was the chief immigration officer. I heard that it was said when they had to hire local lawyers in their firms, what did they say? It's just the cost of doing business in the Cayman Islands. Just the cost of it. So they can afford that. They can afford to pay the high work permit fees, even though they may complain about it. But they would prefer to do that than to still have to hire Caymanians.
But you know how you set those fees. We think that we're going to increase the work permit fee on partners and law firms. We go to the partners and law firms and ask them what they think they can pay. Let's be honest here now. What we should say is, listen, our information is that you're making a couple of $100 million a year. We think your profit should be $200,000 a year. Now, if you want to affect wanting to not hire Caymanians, it's not good to charging them $20,000.
Yeah.
But if you make it $200,000 a year, that'll have an impact on it.
Now, the fact that the revenues have gotten so high from work permit fees and other immigration-related fees that the government has become dependent on it now to a certain extent. If that were removed from the budget, and I don't know what the line item is in relation to it. I think the line item in the last budget cycle was $90+ million, but that was 18 months. Yeah.
So I'm suspecting that the line item in this budget, although it's 2 years broken down, is going to be somewhere in the region of $80 to $90 million.
You would miss that if even if you cut it into half.
Yeah, but you see, here's where the replacement would that come. if Caymanians were promoted to some of those top positions and the work permits were cancelled to make room for Caymanians, the Caymanians, because our income is based on consumption, the Caymanians are going to have more disposable income.
Yes.
So they're going to buy, they're going to go out and involve in the community more, and they're going to spend more money. Right? All we're getting out of those is the work permit fee.
Yeah.
Because they're banking the money somewhere else. And
The
they're
money will stay
spending minimum
here, yes.
amount here. Right?
Okay, we have one caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning again,
Morning again, sir.
the illustrious panel and yourself, dear and Mr. Miller. Always good to hear him on, always the courage to do something. Well, you can solve that problem with a direct income tax or payroll tax by how the whole rest of the world does it. Assessment. You cannot tell me that you have 2 Porsches, 2 Benzes, a $10,000 a month condominium rented, and you are only earning $80,000 or $90,000 a year. You assess you just like how they do it in the United States and other countries. And they will assess you and tell you what you should be paying and what you're earning. And you have to pay. Well, let us all remember, the only reason why the highest salaried person, if you work it out, ever, and one of the world's most famous criminals and murderers, he ever went to jail, was failure to pay the proper income tax. Al Capone, he was earning $3 million.
Tax evasion.
Good, and that is what sent him to prison where he died. Nothing else. No murder charge, nothing else. There is a long arm. You can assess them. The same thing you'd have to do with a consumer section base. You'd have to find out the invoices, what are the costs of true costs of the product and so forth, but you can do it that way. Assess them and say this is what you'll pay. It doesn't take that many employees more, as we said, need to employ more people, but many things don't want the government to employ more people. They'd rather to see, and are hoping to see, Caymanians out on the road with their cups in their hands, begging.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you. I just want to remind that caller also that in the 70s, an attempt was made to introduce some form of income tax in the Cayman Islands, and part of it was based on your potential to earn. Of course, it got shot down, and I look up the copy of the trade winds that I read that in because I wasn't here at the time. I hadn't immigrated to Cayman yet at that point in time. A lot of people think I'm a foreigner.
Another potential source of income that could be allocated to education is the government putting in a national lottery, because there are people taking hundreds of thousands of dollars every week out of the system, out of the economic system. I heard a policeman, this was several years ago, a policeman told me that they stopped a man and he was driving erratically, blah, blah, whatever. They thought he was, drunk or something like that. But they stopped him and gave him the usual search to see if he had any marijuana in his car. And lo and behold, he had over $60,000 in cash in his car. And they couldn't confiscate it because he hadn't committed any offense. Didn't commit any offense. Now, I asked the policeman, where do you think that money came from? He said, Steve, my opinion was that money came from selling lottery. There are millions of dollars taken out of the country every year on the lottery business. Honduras, Jamaica, other lotteries. If the government put in such a system, people could buy it online from other countries. They could get their money from Cayman tax free. If they want to keep their money back here, if their winnings here tax free, they could keep it in the bank tax free, and it would wean the government off of all of these work permit fees that they are now relying upon. If you had that, at the last information I received, which was something 8 or 10 years ago, I understand if the government had put in a national lottery then, that that the government would have gotten something like $600 or $700, $800 million a year. Now, one of the things that was promoted in the 1980s, around 1982, 83, by the late Jim Borden, the late Jim Borden II. The young Jim Borden came up with a formula, and it could have been some other members of his family also, with a formula of asking the banks to give us 1/10 of 1% of all the proceeds that go through the bank every day, instead of charging them the license fee, giving us 1/10 of 1%. That then in 1983 would have bring over $800 or $900 million into the country every year too, and that was shot down by the establishment, because they say if we did that, the people would have the banking institution would have relocated to some other jurisdictions. Now, when you look at that money does not belong to the bank, and I don't think the customers in the bank would mind paying 1/10 or 1% of their transactions that are going through to the country when they're not paying any taxes on it at all.
Mm-hmm. We have two callers. We're going to take one call, go to a break, and take the second caller afterwards. First caller, good morning, welcome to For the Record. Good morning, caller, welcome to For the Record. No one there. Let's take the second caller. Caller, good morning, welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Joey Ebanks calling. I have been listening to your show, and I want to comment on the payroll tax.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm an employer, and everyone knows I've employed expatriate workers in my business over the last 12 years. That's I can't help that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, these people do not want to pay the payroll. They do not want to pay pension. I heard Dr. McFeel mention doing away with pension for expatriate workers. I have been preaching that for the last 15 years because I've been an employer that long. We paid as a payroll tax, earmark it for scholarships for our kids to take the place, to fill the jobs of the people on work permits. That's simple. And Edward, you said something to the effect it would affect Caymanians. This does not apply to Caymanians. Pension must be paid for Caymanians. Or we look after a wage scale. Someone that's making $18,000 or $20,000 a year, an unskilled worker, why are we taking 5% of our money, company's money, to pay a pension for that person? He's not going to qualify for PR. He's not going to get Caymanian status. He's going to leave this island when his term expires. I am not going to keep a position open for 2 years. He collects his pension and then return. He's gone for good as far as I'm concerned.
The problem is that he'll come back to another employer unless we tie the non-payment of pension to a fixed term, non-renewable permit, and you leave the island and you can't come back. The risk we run is because we now have, under our present immigration law, everybody is now entitled to remain here up to 10 years and to apply for PR at year 9. Granted, some not going to get. The problem is the ones that get and haven't been paying pension for that 10 years, then you and I going to have to pay higher consumable tax when they retire because they have lost 10 years of their productive years into pension.
Contributing, yes.
That's the problem with I will support non-pension for work permit holders on a fixed term, non-renewable, non-returnable work permit.
Well, why not do it on based on wages?
But it is based on wages now.
No. I mean, it's 5% of your earnings. But if you're earning $18,000 or $20,000 a year, that person can't afford to pay 5% into a pension. Let him save 5% in his own bank account and take it whenever he leaves. My 5%.
But the problem we have, Joey, we have no guarantee that he's going to leave.
Because because he can stay here until 9 years.
Right, and then we get into
how someone earning $18,000 or $20,000 a year is going to qualify for permanent residence in this country.
They're doing it all the time, Joey.
Yeah,
Trust
well,
me.
let's get a little tighter on that. I mean, how can their point system qualify them for PR?
Well,
Because it's not only based on your financial earnings.
That's
that,
right.
You know,
Remember the promise
things.
of the PPM government in October 2013. Don't worry about this, Ezra. You're an alarmist. These people, we're going to clean this up now. We're going to allow these 1,300 people to stay, but we're going to tighten up the qualifications for PR. They tightened it up. The people that they tightened it up on went and lobbied and took court cases against them, so they had to go back and revise it, right? And they revised it again.
I have my opinion on that too. Anyone that sues this country, do not sit here and wait for his application to be processed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
You sue my country.
Agreed.
You're going to leave that same day. Your permit is going to be, your application is going to be processed in the order in which it is intended. And if you get your permanent residence, we will advise you can come back.
Agreed, Joey.
Caller, I'm going to ask you to leave us there.
That's the risk in allowing people and making it, and what we will be doing then, we will be making it cheaper for employers to hire expatriates over Caymans for the same job.
Okay, we have to take a commercial break now, and we have one caller on hold still. Caller, thank you very much for that. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. That caller who's on hold, please hang in there. We will be back with you shortly as well. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. As promised, we're going straight to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to the four of you there today.
Morning. Good morning.
Very interesting show. To me, I don't quite understand rationale. We're talking about getting additional revenue. We say that we're a consumption and fee-based tax economy. And then, prior to the UDP government that gave away all the things to the Four-Dart Alliance, when they did that, we already destroyed our tax base, our consumption tax base, in many projects. But of course, that was the capo de capo tutti when they did the Four-Dart Alliance thing. Government does not track how much money should have been collected had it not been for the waiving of fees, planning, things to do with, I believe, also with work permit, many other fees, including duties. We don't know and have no idea how much money we have lost by destroying our tax base. Then we're talking about introducing new taxes. We subsidize these people, the billionaires, because they bring people in, they don't pay them enough money to live. So we say we're doing it to help Caymanians, which is really a lie. They're not doing it to help Caymanians. They're doing it so their people can come here and work for wages that are unlivable in the Cayman Islands, one of the highest costs of living in the world. And $6 doesn't do it. And I am asking Mr. MLA Miller if he would consider, like you send motions to the government and ask them to consider, I'm going to ask you to consider moving a motion that would require government to track on each and every account and publish it how much money, had it not been for the waivers of fees and duties and all income generated from that entity, that entity has paid less than another one that didn't have all those subsidies. They're not incentives, they're subsidies. Call it what it is. And so we can see how we're destroying our tax base every day. And now, as that entity has purchased additional property, all of their properties for the next 100,000 years is going to get the same benefit. Mm-hmm. Also, we say we live in a free enterprise society. We don't. because now it becomes uncompetitive for competition to the four-dart empire that John Brown wanting to do the same thing what he is doing, for which he has been able to get these subsidies. And it's from both governments are guilty, because we only have one government now anyway.
I had one start with.
Caller, we have a bank full of calls, so we're going to ask you to abbreviate.
But Billy,
Mr. Miller, let me wrap up, and then you can. I wanted to answer it. So
I got a simple answer for you. Anyway, go ahead.
So what I'm asking you to do, if you would at least ask them to track
Been there,
how much we're losing.
did that, already done it, and they wouldn't track it. They wouldn't even give us. They claim that they can't calculate how much it is. We've asked all those questions by motions and everything else.
I'll use the word.
Okay.
They don't want to, because they don't want people to know.
They don't want to be embarrassed. Right.
Caller?
God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you
going
for
to ask
the
to leave us
extra time,
there.
Mr. Osi.
Okay, thank you. We have a bank full of calls. At least four calls on hold. We're going to ask each caller to be as brief as possible. We're going to continue the conversation until 9:45 this morning. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. We lost that caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is Jonathan Piercy. Good morning, OC.
Good morning, Mr. Piercy. Nice to hear from you.
To Ezard. I'll be as brief as I can. I wanted to speak about the caller before last, and some of the comments that he made. I was certainly I'll abbreviate that, because the last caller actually touched on quite a bit of what I was going to say. But let me just say, because it was important, it did touch a chord with me this morning for me to call in and say this. I believe that a slave doesn't want freedom. I believe that what a slave wants is to become a master. And put that in another way, I believe that a monkey see, monkey do. Because I believe that it's all about power and the cost. For someone to call a radio station, I'll call his name because he called his name, Mr. Joey, to call his to state that he has to employ foreigners, and then turns around and state or suggests that some of these people are making less than $20,000 a year, suggests to me that this man is paying exploitative wages. This man's business is...
I'm not sure that he said that his workers were making less than 20,000.
He didn't say that. No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that he stated. I'm saying that he stated that his business survives on foreign labor. He stated that.
Yeah, he stated that he employs foreign labor, yes, but he did not. But the 20,000, we didn't see that as relating to his worker.
Absolutely. Okay. But I can certainly tell you this. What his business does is not skilled labor, which is exactly and precisely one of the reasons that we have the problems that we have in the Cayman Islands. It is one of the reasons that one of your earlier callers said that many of the jobs that are available don't require even a high school degree, and yet he comes on and says these things. But let me move past that. With respect to the bank, with the greatest of respect to Mr. Miller, the solution is not to stand up in a line and to protest a $5 fee. I am so frustrated when I hear politicians come on to any radio program and sit in a seat and come up with these sort of half-baked excuses or arguments for how to fix things. They represent the people of the Cayman Islands. And if every person, every consumer has to stand up in a line and defend his rights, then there is no need for a legislator. There is no need for a policymaker. They need to stand up on the floor of the House, demand, pass legislation, make protests, have sit out if necessary. Change is not going to happen being a coward. Change is going to happen when we stand up and demand change, and it is not for the common man on the road to do that. Let me also say this. We are not as representatives as they are. They are not responsible for only the fourth and fifth generation Caymanians. That is why we're losing the battle. It's a divide and conquer mindset. They are responsible as representatives to represent everybody. Everyone. The discrimination and the practice isn't just affecting the Caymanians. It is affecting the Jamaican, the Honduran, the Canadian, the Englishman. It's affecting everyone. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And this is what we need to stop playing with these issues. These issues are serious issues. Just as the last caller said, we can't operate on $6 an hour. And as some of the callers said, and we can't allow businesses, banks included, to steal money while politicians sit quietly. It's not just the bank. Okay. We have the telecommunication companies now as well. You go in there and you purchase a phone, and you decide, you know what, I need this phone, but I can't pay for it up front. They will allow you to pay it off over 3 or 4 months, but they add an additional $100. So they're adding a finance fee, and they're not in the business of financing. Who is going to stand up and say anything about these things?
Caller, I'm going to ask you to leave us there. We still have other persons as well. Thank you very much for your call. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, and good morning to the gentleman there.
Good morning.
Didn't try
Yeah,
on there was getting Dr. McField.
yeah, they're all hearing you. Go right ahead, caller.
All right, great. All right, listen, I'm not calling in regards to what anybody else called in before. This is my own on my own level, my own merit. Okay? But I think it's very ironic that I see the irony. It's very ironic for government to make the law that these expatriate workers can now leave and take their money. Actually, anyway, the law is made that if they leave by December, they can take their pension with them. And now they are saying that you can't stop from paying, or we should not stop from paying expatriate pension, because we're assuming, and this is only going by assuming, that at one point they will all be here and will need that pension money in their retirement age. To me, that's ironic. Why are you allowing now the expatriates to take that money, go home, take it home, build their home, start a business over there, and come back 2 years after that and pick up employment with another company or the same company? Now, where are that 10, 15 years of pension funds that they have provided in the country that that the government is trying to protect, that we have to let them pay it? Because you following where I'm going with this?
Yes, we do.
I hope you are, because I talk fast because I know how much time on your radio. But for them to say, no, we can't not let expatriates pay because they might get residence, or they might get permanent residence or status and live amongst us for the rest of their lives. I don't have anything wrong with the problem with that. But for you to assume only on that assumption that they have to continue paying pension because of that assumption, to me that is ironic, if not moronic. It is crazy. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to me, and that is my piece in it. I don't call about what anybody else say. That's my piece.
Thank you very much. Opportunity to respond now to all of those calls.
I just need to. Mr. Billy knows that all the things that he's asking me to do now, I've already done without success. But I really need to answer Mr. Jonathan Pearson, because for him to come on the radio and refer to Desert Miller as being some coward politically, I've been advocating for Caymanian people and fighting for Caymanian people when Jonathan Pearson was walking around in Pampers. Check the records in the house, right? And he'd come on and say all these things. In election time, he'd go on our side and invite them to elect somebody that didn't even graduate from high school to replace me, right? And he talking about we only offering half-baked excuses. I'm glad he woke up today, because I wonder where he was in August when we carried the motions about the banking, right? And the government has already had 2 meetings to try to address it and to give the authority to these people, right? You know, it is amazing sometimes how people can come on and attack other people when they have no substantial basis on which to do that, and they have no track record of themselves of doing anything about it, right? I am not ashamed. In fact, I'll go further. I am proud of my service to this country, and I make no apologies for standing up for what I believe in. And for anybody to infer that Ezra Miller doesn't stand up for what he believes in is absolutely disrespectful and disingenuous. An apology cannot cover the ground. Now, I don't know how the rest of them talk about it, but I can tell me now whether those kind of terminologies apply to me or not.
Okay. Anyone else want to grab the mic?
No.
I think, though, I think, and this is what concerns me from time to time, when we as Caymanians behave in a certain fashion. My view is always to try and find a middle ground. I am very close to both Jonathan and Emily, Mr. Miller, and I'm not sure what just transpired, but I know Mr. Miller has a track record of definitely trying his best to represent the Caymanian community. What just transpired was a little unfortunate, yeah. But I don't necessarily think, though, that and I can't speak for Jonathan necessarily, but I've never known him to. What I've just heard was pretty new, because every time I've had any encounters with him, he's always spoken of Mr. Miller in very high regard. Yeah.
Well,
Mr. Miller?
Yeah. I got to defend myself.
I'm not.
Nobody's gonna come on in any show or in any environment whatsoever. My telling Caymanians to stand up for your rights is so that the politicians can be influenced by the Caymanians standing up and join me and Mr. McLean and the other members of the opposition trying to do something about these things. But if we advocate for these things and Caymanians continue to accept these things being imposed on them, the politicians have no need to do anything about it, because the majority of the people are accepting it. The greatest threat to our country right now is Caymanians not willing to stand up. And we have been beaten over the head so often that poor performance, mediocrity, is now regarded as about excellence. The country that I grew up in, we were told by our parents, we were told by our teachers, we were told by our preachers, we were told by anybody of any standing in the community, strive for excellence. My grandmother used to tell me, my son, if you not got time to do it good now, when you can find time to do it well? Right? But we have so attacked and so browbeaten and lost our identity to these people because we don't stand up to them. That when we hear, let me go back to education. You heard a couple of years ago, we had all these number one passes, right? When you and I, Teresa and Steve went to school, number one was the top, right?
That's right.
So we automatically assume there's been a huge improvement in the number of passes. They turn it upside down. Number one now is the fail grade, right?
Down.
And number 5, so when we hear that we have all these number one passes, we feel okay, right? Then we introduce this leveling system, which is totally confusing to everybody involved. It was created in some place in England, and I understand that they themselves have thrown it out. But we were that with how we were with the PMFL, the country that started all of that, which we adopted it from, throughout the politicians who put it in place and changed the whole system, which was New Zealand, but we're still running with it. The leveling system is so confusing and so subjective that most of the students and the parents and the teachers don't know whether the children are succeeding or not. Now, you can't argue with 90%, 80%, 70%, but here's how the leveling system works, as I understand it. Let's go back to primary school. You may have somebody in grade 2, because it's not linked to the grade you're at, you know. You may have somebody in grade 2 who's reading at 3A. You think, well, she's improved, right? From that teacher, because it's subjective. The person goes to the next grade up, and that teacher rates her reading as 2A, right? Because the expectation, meeting expectations, not excelling, starts at 2A and goes up to 3B, right? Yeah. So listen, I am proud, and I am fair to say that the members of the opposition, I believe, we are doing our best to bring things forward, and we're going to do what we have to do to put the necessary pressure on the government. We have 2 other things that we're organizing right now that we believe will make us more accessible to the people that we represent. We're going to start doing a program on national television on Camp 27, similar to what the FDR fireside chats used to be, where one of us will be on for an hour once a month talking about the issues that we think concern the country. And we are going to do once a quarter what we are calling face-to-face, where all 5 of us are going to go to every electoral district, including Cayman and Little Cayman, and have a public discourse with people of the issues of the day.
Yeah.
The thing is, critical thinking is not a priority in our community. Certainly, critical thinking among us doesn't seem to be a priority. And taking a note from what one of the callers have said, our minds appear to continue in a state of bondage. And I rate that in parallel to the lack of courage that we have to stand up for things that we believe in. It still remains only a handful of people who still have the self-esteem. I mean, when Mr. Macfield came in this morning, Mr. Miller, you were speaking of how Steve looked and whatever. And one of the comments that Steve made was, well, that's the only thing that folks can't take away from me. It's who we are and valuing who we are, we still don't do that. You know, and it's as though we were ashamed to do that. So we have to work on this thing with the self-esteem. But I'm not surprised when we look at where education is, because education is the bedrock that builds that self-esteem. And you need to have folks that care enough, that want you to succeed, for you to even want and have a desire to succeed.
And without, I would say, without protection from legislation and enforcement, I have to stand up individually for my rights.
Exactly.
How else I'm going to do?
And knowing how you're going to generate that legislative protection is by standing up.
Yeah, standing up. And let me tell you, if you don't stand, it means that the wave, the tidal wave, the political, economic tidal wave is going to go further inland against you. And it's a good thing that you're standing up to try to keep the economic and the social balance. And I used to tell my grandmother, Sarah, used to say, well, you know, you got to give up your right for peace. And I says, I'm not doing any such thing. I'm not giving up my right for peace. And then she say, well, son, you got to turn the other cheek. Well, the man hit me in my right side jaw. He didn't broke it. I must turn my left hand to broke my left jaw. I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. That's not the way the world works, really.
Well, I hope to get an opportunity the next week to read an article that was sent by one of our listeners, and it's a letter to the editor of the Caymanian Compass of the Yesteryears. This would have been in the early 80s, I believe, because it refers to the 1976 elections and then the 1980 elections, and it talks about self-destruction and the many promises that were made about Cayman for Caymanians, and in every instance it never materialized. It's a pretty long letter, so I will try to break it down, and for one of our shows next week that I would be able to share that with our listening audience as well. Mr. Miller, any closing comments before you leave?
Yeah, I need to make two announcements about things happening in my electoral district. Our district council, the district council meeting is on the next week, the Thursday the 25th at 8 p.m. and it's at the Clifton Hutter High School again this month, because we give ground to the Pilgrim Church, who's having a youth convention, and they want to use the Civic Center, and we know that is very important for the youth in our community. And then we have a bingo night planned for the Aidan Mile Primary School as a fundraiser for the PTA to assist the school on Saturday the 28th. So we're inviting everybody to come out and support those two events. And I just want to give a word of defense to my friend Joey. I don't know anybody in a small business in the Cayman Islands that has spent more time and more effort and given more opportunity to Caymanians to get to work for him than him.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So, and he suffers a lot, and for people to just come out and attack him like that
I agree.
without proper information it's just not right.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank my two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField, and again I want to thank the Honorable Diaz Miller, Leader of the Opposition, for such an insightful and informative show again this morning. I want to thank our listening and viewing audience for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for a talk today. Have a great weekend, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.